On a
You
crisp
have no
autumn evening in
proof!
October 2023, the quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood was disturbed by an unsettling call to emergency services. Linda Hayes, a 42-year-old single mother, dialed 911 at 8:15 p.m., reporting that she had found her 17-year-old son, Marcus Hayes, unconscious in his bedroom. Linda's voice was calm but edged with urgency as she described the scene. Marcus had apparently fallen and hit his head, and she feared he was seriously injured. Paramedics arrived swiftly, rushing Marcus to the nearby Maplewood General Hospital. But the gravity of the situation soon became clear. Despite medical intervention, Marcus was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Detective Rachel Kim was assigned to the case, her reputation for meticulous attention to detail preceding her. Upon arriving at the Hayes residence, a well-maintained two-story home on Elm Street, she immediately noticed several inconsistencies that troubled her instincts. The neighborhood, typically serene and closely knit, was stunned by the news. Parents whispered anxiously on sidewalks, and neighbors gathered in small groups, trying to piece together how tragedy had struck so suddenly. Before we jump into this gripping tale of tragedy and justice, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so you won't miss any updates. And tell me, what are your thoughts on how evidence can change the course of a case? Linda Hayes met Detective Kim in the living room, an open-plan space cluttered with the remnants of a family evening. Empty cups, a half-finished board game, and a nearly untouched dinner. Linda recounted her version of events with a steady voice. She had come home late from work, found Marcus's bedroom door closed, and upon knocking with no response, she entered to find him collapsed on the floor. She insisted it was an accident, that Marcus must have tripped and fallen. Yet, as Kim observed Linda, she noted an unusual stillness in her demeanor, a measured calm that seemed rehearsed rather than spontaneous. Something was off. Marcus's bedroom was where the first physical clues emerged. The room was dimly lit by a single bedside lamp casting long shadows, revealing a scene that did not fully align with Linda's account. The bed was unmade, sheets tossed aside haphazardly, and the floor bore the marks of a disturbance. Broken glass scattered near the foot of the bed and chairs pushed askew. A large bruise was visible on Marcus's neck, dark and swollen, suggesting more than just a simple fall. The detective's trained eye caught these details immediately, sensing that the surface narrative might be covering something deeper. Outside the house, neighbors were interviewed, their statements adding layers to the unfolding mystery. Several reported hearing loud noises around 7:30 p.m. A crash, muffled shouting, the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. But no one had called the police until Linda's 911 call an hour later. The local media began to circle, their cameras and reporters descending on Maplewood, amplifying the community's shock and grief. Yet, amid the public outpouring, Detective Kim remained focused on the quiet inconsistencies. As the night deepened, the forensics team arrived, carefully cataloging every detail. The broken glass was identified as coming from a shattered picture frame, a sentimental family photograph now lying in fragments. The bruise on Marcus's neck raised immediate concerns about possible strangulation or a violent struggle. Paramedics' reports noted that the injuries were inconsistent with a simple fall. There were defensive wounds on Marcus's arms, as if he had tried to shield himself. These findings contrasted sharply with Linda's calm recollection. Detective Kim paused in the hallway, reviewing the timeline in her mind. Linda had returned home shortly after 7 p.m., according to her statement, and found Marcus unconscious within minutes. Yet the neighbor's account suggested a disturbance earlier in the evening. The detective's instincts told her this was no accident. Her conversation with Linda grew more probing, but the mother's answers remained vague, sometimes contradictory. Linda claimed to have been in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard a noise, but no one in the house reported hearing a call for help. The Hayes family history, though not widely known, began to emerge as relevant background. Marcus was a bright, ambitious high school senior, known for his academic achievements and involvement in the school's debate team. Friends described him as friendly, but lately reserved, hinting at struggles beneath the surface. Linda Hayes was a hard-working woman, juggling 2 jobs, striving to provide for her family after divorcing Marcus's father 5 years earlier. Despite the outward appearance of stability, those close to the family whispered about tension and occasional arguments between Marcus and his stepfather, James Hayes, who lived separately but remained connected to the household through custody arrangements. Detective Kim requested permission to speak with Marcus's friends and teachers, hoping to understand more about his state of mind in the weeks leading up to his death. Early interviews painted a picture of a teenager increasingly withdrawn, sometimes anxious, and troubled by conflicts at home. Teachers noted his declining attendance and focus, while close friends mentioned heated conversations with James, though Marcus had been reluctant to elaborate. This backdrop added a layer of complexity to the investigation, suggesting possible motives beyond accidental injury. Back at the crime scene, the forensic team meticulously gathered evidence, photographing the room from every angle. The broken glass, the scattered furniture, and the bruising on Marcus's body painted a narrative of struggle. Detective Kim's notes highlighted the importance of the bruise on the neck and the defensive wounds on the arms, signs that pointed away from an accidental fall and toward a violent encounter. The team also collected fibers and trace evidence, hoping to find any foreign DNA that might shed light on the events of that evening. Linda Hayes continued to cooperate, but her guarded responses heightened Detective Kim's suspicions. The calmness that had initially seemed composed now appeared rehearsed, as if Linda was carefully controlling the narrative. When asked about the noises neighbors reported, Linda dismissed them as normal household sounds or neighborhood activity. Yet the timeline she provided conflicted with multiple witness accounts. Small discrepancies piled up. A misplaced clock, a contradictory statement about when she last saw Marcus alive, and an unexplained absence of phone records during the crucial hour. Throughout the investigation, Detective Kim remained aware of the broader implications. The community's shock was palpable. Maplewood was a place where such violence was rare, and the death of a promising young man like Marcus sent ripples of fear and sadness through the streets. Police presence increased, and social workers were called to support the family and neighbors. The local high school held a memorial assembly, with students and staff mourning the loss of one of their own. As the night gave way to early morning, Detective Kim compiled her initial findings. The scene was inconsistent with an accidental fall. Signs of a struggle, unexplained injuries, and a mother whose story did not fully hold together. The evidence suggested that Marcus Hayes' death was far from accidental, raising the possibility of foul play. With new leads to pursue, including interviews with family and friends, forensic analysis, and digital evidence yet to be examined, the case was only beginning. In the quiet moments before dawn, Detective Kim prepared to delve deeper into the complexities of the Hayes family, determined to uncover the truth behind the tragic death that had shattered a community's peace. In the days following Marcus Hayes' death, the investigation intensified under Detective Rachel Kim's steady guidance. As the initial shock in Maplewood began to settle, deeper scrutiny of the crime scene and witness accounts revealed a growing web of contradictions and unanswered questions. The broken glass found scattered across Marcus's bedroom floor was carefully analyzed by the forensic team, who confirmed it came from a family photo frame, a detail that added a poignant note to the mounting evidence of a struggle. Yet the circumstances surrounding how and why it was broken remained unclear. One of the earliest and most perplexing findings was the mysterious bruise on Marcus's neck. Medical examiners suggested it was consistent with strangulation or at least the application of significant force, a detail that starkly contradicted Linda Hayes' initial claim that Marcus had simply fallen. The bruise's size and pattern indicated it was inflicted not by accident, but during a violent confrontation. This revelation prompted Detective Kim to revisit Linda's statements with renewed skepticism. Alongside the physical evidence, witness reports began to paint a more troubling picture of the evening in question. Several neighbors recalled hearing loud noises, including a crash and raised voices, sometime around 7:30 p.m. Roughly 45 minutes before Linda's 911 call. One neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a retired schoolteacher living across the street, described hearing what she thought were angry shouts, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Another neighbor, Tom Reynolds, reported a loud thud as if furniture had been pushed or knocked over. Despite these accounts, no one had intervened or called the authorities during the disturbance, waiting instead for Linda's call. Detective Kim found these neighbor testimonies troubling, as they introduced a gap of time during which Marcus's fate was uncertain. The noises suggested a violent altercation, yet the delay in emergency response could mean crucial minutes were lost. When confronted with these accounts, Linda Hayes maintained that she had been in the kitchen preparing dinner, unaware of any conflict. However, her calm and seemingly rehearsed demeanor during questioning began to raise red flags for the detective. The consistency of her story faltered under scrutiny, and subtle cues, avoided eye contact, slight hesitations, hinted at concealment. Further complicating the investigation were small but significant discrepancies in Linda's timeline. She had initially stated she returned home at 7:05 p.m., but phone records indicated her arrival was closer to 7:45 p.m., aligning more closely with the neighbors' reports of noise. When asked to clarify, Linda offered vague explanations about errands and delays, but her answers lacked specificity. Detective Kim noted that such contradictions, while not definitive proof of guilt, could indicate attempts to obscure the truth. The physical evidence in Marcus's room was equally compelling. In addition to the broken glass and bruising, the forensic team documented overturned furniture and signs of a struggle. A chair was tipped over near the bed, and a lamp had been knocked to the floor, its cord pulled taut. More disturbingly, Marcus's arms bore defensive wounds, cuts and bruises consistent with someone trying to fend off an attack. The medical examiner's report emphasized these injuries, suggesting that Marcus had fought back against his assailant. In light of these findings, Detective Kim expanded her focus beyond the immediate scene. She ordered a detailed forensic sweep of the house, looking for any additional evidence that might explain the sequence of events. Dusting for fingerprints, searching for trace fibers, and collecting DNA samples became a priority. The team also secured Marcus's personal belongings, including his phone and laptop, hoping to uncover clues about his state of mind and relationships. Meanwhile, the community's reaction grew more intense. Local media outlets began extensive coverage, with news crews broadcasting from the quiet suburban streets of Maplewood. Social media buzzed with speculation and sympathy, while neighbors expressed both grief and unease. The tragedy of a young life ended so abruptly touched everyone, but the emerging inconsistencies stirred a sense of suspicion. Was this truly a tragic accident? Or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface? Amid the growing tension, Detective Kim arranged follow-up interviews with Linda Hayes. These sessions were marked by a noticeable shift in the mother's demeanor. Once composed and cooperative, Linda became increasingly defensive and evasive. When pressed about the noises neighbors had reported, she dismissed them as normal household sounds, or neighborhood activity, refusing to acknowledge any conflict. Her answers grew shorter, and at times she appeared frustrated by the questioning. Detective Kim sensed that Linda was withholding crucial information. The calm exterior seemed a facade masking a deeper turmoil. The detective's experience told her that such behavior often signaled guilt or trauma, and while Linda could be mourning her son's death, the inconsistencies suggested more. The investigation began to focus on uncovering what Linda might be hiding, whether it was knowledge of the events leading to Marcus's death or involvement in the incident itself. Adding to the complexity were reports from friends and acquaintances who described Marcus in recent weeks as withdrawn and anxious. Some noted that he had been involved in heated disputes at home, particularly with his stepfather, James Hayes, although James lived separately. These revelations introduced potential motives and suspects outside the immediate family circle. Detective Kim started to consider the possibility that Marcus's death was connected to ongoing family tensions. In the days that followed, Detective Kim coordinated with forensic analysts to process the collected evidence. The bruise on Marcus's neck, the defensive wounds, and the broken glass were all examined for DNA and other forensic markers. Preliminary results indicated the presence of an unknown DNA sample on the broken glass shards, which did not match Marcus or Linda. This discovery opened new avenues for investigation, suggesting that another individual might have been present during the struggle. Security footage from nearby homes and street cameras was reviewed to track movements around the Hayes residence during the critical time frame. While no clear images of suspects emerged, motion detected near the property around 7:30 p.m. coincided with neighbor reports of loud noises. The investigators hoped that further analysis might reveal more detailed information or identify potential witnesses. Detective Kim also scrutinized Linda's phone records and messages. The absence of calls or texts during the time of the incident was puzzling. Normally, a mother finding her child unconscious would immediately reach out for help or contact family members. Linda's silence during this period contradicted typical behavior in emergencies, deepening the detective's suspicion. Throughout the investigation, Detective Kim remained mindful of the delicate balance between seeking justice and respecting the family's grief. She recognized that trauma could cause confusion and inconsistencies. Yet the accumulation of evidence painted a troubling picture, one that could not be ignored. The quiet suburban neighborhood, once a haven of safety, was now a scene of suspicion and sorrow. As the days unfolded, Detective Kim prepared to delve further into the family's dynamics and relationships, determined to unravel the truth behind the violent events of that autumn evening. The initial narrative of an accidental fall was unraveling, replaced by a more complex and disturbing reality. The community waited anxiously, hoping for answers to the questions that now hung heavily in the air. As the investigation into Marcus Hayes' death deepened, Detective Rachel Kim turned her attention to the family's complex dynamics, hoping to uncover the underlying tensions that might explain the tragic events of that autumn evening. The initial focus on physical evidence had revealed signs of struggle and possible foul play, but understanding the relationships within the Hayes household was proving equally crucial. Marcus, at 17, was regarded by many as a bright and ambitious young man. Known for his sharp intellect and involvement in extracurricular activities, he had been a senior at Maplewood High School with aspirations for college. Yet beneath this promising exterior, those close to him described a boy grappling with emotional turmoil. Friends and teachers alike recounted a gradual withdrawal over recent months, with Marcus often appearing anxious and distracted. Interviews with classmates revealed that Marcus had recently become more private, avoiding social gatherings and sometimes missing school. His debate coach, Ms. Linda Garcia expressed concern. He was one of my best students, but lately he seemed lost in thought, distracted. When I asked if everything was okay, he just said he had family issues. This vague response hinted at deeper troubles at home, though Marcus had not elaborated. Family dynamics, however, were far from straightforward. Marcus lived primarily with his mother, Linda Hayes, following her divorce from Marcus's biological father 5 years prior. Linda, a single mother juggling 2 jobs, was described by neighbors as hardworking and dedicated, yet strained under the pressures of her responsibilities. A key figure in the investigation was James Hayes, Linda's current husband and Marcus's stepfather, who did not live full-time in the family home but maintained frequent contact. Detective Kim's interviews with family, friends, and neighbors painted a picture of underlying tension. Several described heated arguments between Marcus and James, sometimes overheard from outside the house. One neighbor, Sarah Mitchell, recalled a particularly loud dispute a few weeks before Marcus's death. There was yelling, slamming doors. It was clear something was wrong. Marcus seemed scared afterward. These accounts suggested a volatile atmosphere in the household that may have contributed to the tragedy. Linda's own statements about the evening of the incident were scrutinized carefully. During multiple interviews, she appeared evasive when questioned about the relationship between Marcus and James. Initially, she downplayed any conflict, portraying the household as generally peaceful. Yet, as Detective Kim pressed for details, cracks appeared. Linda admitted to occasional disagreements, but insisted they were typical family quarrels, nothing severe. However, her reluctance to discuss James in detail raised suspicion that there might be more beneath the surface. Further complicating the picture were inconsistencies in Linda's account of the night Marcus died. She described spending the evening preparing dinner and then discovering Marcus unconscious. But her timeline shifted slightly with each retelling. In one interview, she claimed she had been home alone. In another, she mentioned James briefly visiting. These contradictions, though subtle, suggested a level of uncertainty or intentional obfuscation. Detective Kim also sought insight from Marcus's closest friends. Several revealed that Marcus had confided fears about his stepfather's temper and controlling behavior. One friend, who wished to remain anonymous, disclosed, "Marcus told me he was scared of James. He said things got worse recently, that James was always angry, and Marcus didn't know how to handle it." These testimonies added a layer of urgency, indicating that Marcus might have been living under significant emotional strain. School counselors and social workers who had interacted with Marcus corroborated this narrative. They described him as a student in distress, occasionally withdrawn and expressing feelings of helplessness. Although no formal reports of abuse had been filed, the signs of domestic tension were evident. Detective Kim began to consider the possibility that Marcus's death was not just the result of an isolated incident, but possibly the culmination of ongoing familial conflict. The investigation into the family's financial situation also revealed stressors that could have exacerbated tensions. Linda Hayes struggled to make ends meet, balancing multiple jobs and caring for Marcus. James Hayes, meanwhile, faced his own challenges, including unemployment and a history of volatile behavior reported by acquaintances. These elements combined to create a pressure cooker environment within the household. Detective Kim requested access to family communications and digital records to better understand the interactions between Marcus, Linda, and James. Early analysis of text messages and call logs revealed a pattern of strained communication. Marcus had sent several messages to a close friend expressing frustration and fear regarding James's temper. One particularly troubling message read, "I don't feel safe at home anymore." The timing of these messages, just days before Marcus's death, underscored the urgency of the situation. Interviews with James Hayes added another dimension to the investigation. When questioned, James appeared defensive, downplaying any serious conflict with Marcus. He acknowledged arguing with the teenager, but characterized the disputes as typical father-son tensions. However, his evasiveness and reluctance to provide clear answers raised further concerns. Detective Kim noted that James's demeanor was guarded, and his explanations often lacked detail. As Detective Kim sifted through the complex web of relationships, it became clear that the Hayes family was struggling under the weight of unresolved conflicts. Marcus's recent behavior, his withdrawal, anxiety, and fear, reflected a young man caught in a difficult and potentially dangerous environment. The detective's growing conviction was that the circumstances surrounding Marcus's death could not be fully understood without addressing these deeper, familial issues. In parallel with the interviews, the forensic team continued analyzing the physical evidence from the crime scene. The defensive wounds on Marcus's arms, the bruising on his neck, and the signs of struggle in his bedroom all pointed to a violent encounter. Combined with the emerging background of family tension, the investigation was shifting toward a narrative of domestic violence rather than accidental injury. Detective Kim also reached out to local support organizations specializing in domestic abuse and youth counseling, hoping to gain further insight into the psychological dynamics at play. Experts shared that adolescents in volatile family situations often exhibit withdrawal and behavioral changes, mirroring Marcus's recent conduct. The detective considered these perspectives essential in building a comprehensive understanding of the case. Throughout this phase of the investigation, Detective Kim maintained a delicate balance, respecting the family's grief while pursuing the truth with unwavering determination. The community watched closely as the layers of the Hayes family's story unfolded, revealing a troubled household marked by conflict and fear. Marcus Hayes, once a promising teenager with a bright future, had become a symbol of the devastating consequences of unresolved domestic strife. As interviews concluded and evidence accumulated, Detective Kim prepared to delve deeper into the forensic and digital findings, aware that the answers she sought lay both in the physical traces left behind and the complex human relationships that defined Marcus's final days. The investigation was far from over, but the direction was clear. Understanding the family's internal struggles was key to uncovering what truly happened on that fateful autumn evening. In the wake of mounting suspicions surrounding Marcus Hayes' death, Detective Rachel Kim intensified the forensic and digital investigation, seeking tangible proof to clarify the murky circumstances that had thus far relied heavily on conflicting testimonies and circumstantial evidence. The physical traces at the crime scene, combined with emerging digital footprints, were beginning to form a clearer picture of the events on that fateful autumn evening. The forensic team meticulously re-examined Marcus's bedroom, focusing on the bruise on his neck and the defensive wounds on his arms. Their analysis confirmed that the neck injury was consistent with strangulation, indicating that significant force had been applied for a sustained period. These findings directly contradicted the initial theory of an accidental fall and reinforced the possibility of a violent altercation. The defensive wounds, likely inflicted as Marcus tried to protect himself, suggested a struggle involving more than one individual. Moreover, the forensic experts uncovered traces of foreign DNA on the broken glass frame found near the bed. This DNA did not match Marcus's or his mother Linda's, introducing the possibility of a third party's involvement. Further testing was underway to determine the source, but the presence of an unknown genetic profile intensified the investigation's urgency. Detective Kim recognized that identifying this individual could be pivotal in solving the case. Parallel to the physical evidence, The digital examination of Marcus's phone and other electronic devices yielded revealing insights. The phone's call logs and messaging history were recovered, despite attempts to delete certain entries. Investigators found a series of deleted texts and calls that had been recovered through forensic software, illuminating a pattern of escalating conflict in Marcus's life. Among the recovered messages were exchanges between Marcus and his close friend, where Marcus expressed fear about his home situation. One message read, "It's getting worse. I don't know if I can take it anymore." In another, Marcus pleaded for advice on how to handle his stepfather's aggression. These digital confessions underscored the emotional distress Marcus was experiencing and hinted at the severity of the domestic tensions. Interestingly, the phone's data showed deleted calls to James Hayes, Marcus's stepfather, during the hours leading up to the incident. While the content of these calls was irretrievable, their deletion suggested an attempt to erase incriminating evidence. Detective Kim flagged this pattern as suspicious, considering James's known history of volatile behavior. Security camera footage from nearby residences and public spaces was also scrutinized. A camera mounted on a neighbor's porch captured movement near the Hayes home around 7:25 p.m., shortly before Linda's 911 call. The footage was grainy but showed a shadowy figure entering the house through the side door. Although the image was not clear enough for positive identification, it suggested that someone entered or left the premises during the critical time frame. Further investigation revealed that the side door was not locked that evening, an anomaly given the family's usual routine. This detail raised questions about who had access to the house and whether the entry was forced or voluntary. Detective Kim considered the possibility that the unidentified figure captured on camera could be linked to the unknown DNA found at the scene. Marcus's phone records also revealed gaps during the early evening, with several calls and messages deleted or missing. Forensic analysts worked to recover these, hoping to uncover communications that might explain the events leading to the fatal confrontation. Among the recovered data were text messages between Marcus and an unidentified contact, with cryptic references to the plan and getting out, suggesting Marcus may have been considering drastic measures to escape his situation. In addition to digital evidence, the medical examiner's report provided crucial information about the timing of Marcus's death. The report estimated that Marcus had died between 7:15 and 7:45 p.m., aligning with the neighbor's accounts of loud noises and the shadowy figure seen entering the house. This timeline further contradicted Linda Hayes' statements about her arrival time and actions that evening. Detective Kim also reviewed emergency call logs and 911 recordings. Linda's call, placed at 8:15 p.m., was nearly an hour after the estimated time of death. The delay raised concerns about the mother's actions during that critical window. When questioned, Linda claimed to have been in the kitchen preparing dinner and unaware of the severity of Marcus's condition. However, the timing and digital evidence suggested otherwise. The detectives' team sought to reconstruct the timeline using all available data: physical evidence, witness statements, digital footprints, and medical analysis. The emerging narrative was one of a violent encounter occurring soon after 7:15 p.m., followed by a delay before emergency services were alerted. This gap in time was critical and remained unexplained. As the investigation progressed, Detective Kim coordinated with cybercrime specialists to analyze Marcus's laptop and social media accounts. Preliminary findings showed that Marcus had been researching ways to protect himself from domestic violence and had visited websites related to youth shelters and emergency hotlines. These digital footprints painted a picture of a teenager desperately seeking help and safety. The social media analysis also revealed interactions with a close online confidant, someone with whom Marcus shared his fears and plans. Messages between the two discussed the possibility of Marcus leaving home to escape his stepfather's aggression. This connection became a focal point for further inquiry, as the identity and role of this confidant could provide insight into Marcus's final days. Detective Kim also reviewed footage from the local school, interviewing staff who recalled Marcus's recent behavior. Teachers reported that Marcus had seemed distracted and distressed, occasionally arriving late or leaving early. A school counselor noted that Marcus had once mentioned problems at home, but had not disclosed specifics. This behavioral pattern corresponded with the evidence gathered from his digital devices. Meanwhile, forensic teams continued to process physical evidence from the Hayes residence. Fingerprint analysis on the broken glass and other items in Marcus's room was underway. Early results indicated the presence of prints belonging to Linda Hayes and Marcus, as expected, but also unidentified prints that did not match any known family members. This finding reinforced the theory of a third party's involvement. Detective Kim carefully compiled all findings into a comprehensive report, recognizing the strength of the forensic and digital evidence in building the case. The combination of physical injuries consistent with assault, the presence of unknown DNA and fingerprints, suspicious deletions of digital communications, and contradictory witness statements painted a compelling picture of a violent event concealed beneath a facade of normalcy. As the pieces fell into place, Detective Kim prepared to expand the investigation, focusing on identifying the unknown individuals involved and uncovering the motives behind the attack on Marcus Hayes. The evidence was mounting, but critical questions remained unanswered. The detectives' resolve to pursue the truth only deepened, knowing that justice for Marcus depended on unraveling this tangled web of physical and digital clues. As the forensic and digital evidence steadily illuminated the circumstances surrounding Marcus Hayes' death, Detective Rachel Kim's investigation took a decisive turn toward examining the motives and relationships that could have led to such a tragic outcome. Central to this was a growing focus on James Hayes, Marcus's stepfather, whose history and behavior now came under intense scrutiny. James Hayes, a 45-year-old man with a troubled past, had long been a figure of tension within the Hayes household. Interviews with friends, family, and acquaintances revealed a pattern of domestic disputes and personal instability. Several sources described James as volatile, prone to anger, and at times controlling. This reputation was corroborated by police records indicating previous incidents of domestic disturbances, although no formal charges had been filed. Detective Kim's review of James's background uncovered episodes where neighbors and family members had witnessed loud arguments and signs of conflict. One former neighbor recounted, "There were nights when you could hear shouting through the walls. It was clear things weren't peaceful." These accounts painted a portrait of a man struggling to maintain control over his personal life, with the Hayes family caught in the crossfire. Financial difficulties appeared to compound James's stress. Records showed that he had recently lost steady employment, leading to mounting debts and a strained relationship with Linda Hayes. The financial strain added pressure to an already fragile domestic situation, with tensions frequently boiling over during family interactions. This context provided a potential motive for conflict with Marcus, who had been vocal about his dissatisfaction with the household environment. Text message exchanges between Marcus and a close friend, recovered through forensic analysis, shed light on the teenager's fears and the escalating discord at home. Marcus confided, "James is always angry. I don't know how much longer I can handle it." Another message read, "I'm scared he's going to hurt me if I say the wrong thing." These digital pleas underscored a climate of fear and control that Marcus felt trapped within. Further examination of James's phone revealed attempts to delete incriminating messages, especially those exchanged with Linda and Marcus in the days leading up to the incident. The deliberate erasure of communications suggested a consciousness of guilt, or at least an effort to obscure evidence. Detective Kim considered this behavior significant, indicative of someone trying to cover their tracks. In interviews, James presented himself as defensive and dismissive of allegations regarding his temper and behavior. When questioned about his relationship with Marcus, he acknowledged disagreements but minimized their severity, portraying them as typical father-son conflicts. However, his evasive answers and inconsistent statements raised suspicion. Detective Kim noted his reluctance to cooperate fully, which contrasted sharply with the mounting evidence against him. The investigation also uncovered a series of deleted text messages from Marcus's phone that appeared to be attempts to reach out for help. Messages to a trusted friend included references to plans to escape the home and getting away from James. These communications painted a picture of a young man seeking refuge from an increasingly hostile environment. Through digital forensics, Detective Kim identified a close friend who had been in regular contact with Marcus during his final days. This friend provided crucial insights into Marcus's state of mind, describing him as fearful and desperate. Marcus was scared of what might happen if he stayed home. He told me he felt like he was walking on eggshells around James. The friend revealed during a confidential interview. The investigation began to piece together a timeline in which James's desire to assert control over the household and silence Marcus's complaints culminated in a violent confrontation. The forensic evidence of defensive wounds and strangulation, alongside the digital trail of fear and conflict, pointed toward James as the likely assailant. Detective Kim also explored James's efforts to manipulate the narrative post-incident. The deletion of phone records and inconsistent statements suggested a calculated attempt to evade responsibility. Additionally, inquiries into Linda Hayes' role uncovered her potential awareness of the escalating conflict and possible complicity in concealing events. Community members and family friends offered mixed perspectives on James's character. While some described him as a struggling man under pressure, others warned of his aggressive tendencies. This dichotomy complicated the investigation, as the defense of a troubled individual clashed with the need for accountability. In parallel, Detective Kim coordinated with forensic psychologists to evaluate James's psychological profile. Preliminary assessments described him as having a volatile personality with tendencies toward aggression and manipulation. These traits aligned with the behavioral patterns observed during interviews and evidence collection. As the investigation advanced, Detective Kim prepared to move toward formal charges. The cumulative evidence, physical injuries consistent with assault, motive derived from familial tension and fear, and digital communications revealing attempts to conceal wrongdoing, formed a compelling case against James Hayes. The community, meanwhile, grappled with the unsettling reality that a familiar figure could be implicated in such a tragedy. The case drew attention to broader issues of domestic violence and the vulnerability of youth caught in turbulent family dynamics. Detective Kim's next steps involved coordinating with prosecutors to build a legal strategy that accounted for the psychological and forensic complexities of the case. The impending trial promised to be a focal point for discussions on family violence, justice, and protection of vulnerable individuals. Throughout the process, Detective Kim remained committed to uncovering the full truth behind Marcus Hayes' death. The investigation's revelations about James Hayes' history, motives, and actions underscored the multifaceted nature of domestic violence cases, where personal struggles, fear, and control intersect with devastating consequences. As the pieces continued to fall into place, the detective prepared to confront the legal and emotional challenges ahead. Determined to seek justice for Marcus and shed light on the darker realities hidden behind closed doors. On the morning of November 15, 2023, James Hayes was taken into custody at his workplace, a modest auto repair shop on the outskirts of Maplewood. His arrest on suspicion of second-degree murder sent ripples through the community, confirming long-held suspicions and opening a new chapter in the tragic investigation of Marcus Hayes' death. Detective Rachel Kim was present during the arrest, noting James's demeanor, defensive, guarded, and uncooperative. In the hours that followed, James was transported to the county detention center for booking and initial interrogation. Throughout the process, he maintained his innocence, repeatedly denying any involvement in Marcus's death. His voice was measured but resolute, insisting that there was no proof linking him to the crime. Yet beneath the surface, his evasiveness and refusal to elaborate on key details suggested a man prepared to protect himself at all costs. Recognizing the complexity of the case and the psychological factors at play, Detective Kim requested a comprehensive psychological evaluation for James. Dr. Elena Alvarez, a forensic psychologist with extensive experience in domestic violence cases, was assigned to assess James's mental state and provide insights into his behavior patterns. The evaluation aimed to determine his psychological fitness for trial and explore any underlying issues that might have influenced his actions. During the initial sessions, James presented as defensive and guarded, often deflecting questions or offering minimal responses. Dr. Alvarez noted signs of anger and frustration, coupled with a tendency to manipulate conversations to avoid incriminating himself. Despite this, moments of vulnerability surfaced, revealing a man grappling with inner turmoil and conflicting emotions. James's psychological profile, as outlined by Dr. Alvarez, highlighted a volatile personality marked by impulsivity, aggression, and difficulties in managing stress. These traits, combined with a history of domestic disputes and a pattern of controlling behavior, suggested a high potential for violent outbursts under pressure. The psychologist observed that James exhibited manipulative tendencies, often seeking to dominate interpersonal interactions and evade accountability. Throughout the evaluation, James denied any violent intent on the night of Marcus's death, attributing the incident to an unfortunate accident and blaming external circumstances. However, inconsistencies in his narrative and nonverbal cues, such as avoiding eye contact and displaying nervous tics, indicated possible deception. Dr. Alvarez concluded that while James was mentally competent to stand trial, his psychological makeup posed challenges for both the prosecution and defense. Detective Kim collaborated closely with Dr. Alvarez, utilizing the psychological insights to inform interrogation strategies and prepare for the upcoming court proceedings. Understanding James's behavioral patterns enabled the investigative team to anticipate potential tactics aimed at undermining the case or shifting blame. Meanwhile, James's initial statements to law enforcement were scrutinized alongside forensic evidence and witness testimonies. His claim of innocence faced significant challenges due to the physical injuries on Marcus consistent with assault, the presence of James's DNA and fingerprints in contested areas, and digital evidence revealing attempts to delete incriminating communications. Despite the mounting evidence, James remained steadfast in his denial, framing himself as a victim of circumstance. His legal counsel argued for a presumption of innocence and questioned the reliability of some forensic findings, suggesting alternative explanations for the injuries and digital deletions. This defense approach set the stage for a contentious legal battle. The community's reaction to James's arrest was mixed. Some expressed relief that a suspect had been apprehended, hoping for justice for Marcus and his grieving mother, Linda Hayes. Others voiced concern over the complexities of domestic violence cases, emphasizing the need for careful consideration of psychological factors and fair treatment under the law. Detective Kim was acutely aware of the broader implications. Marcus's death was not just a criminal case, but a reflection of systemic issues surrounding domestic abuse, youth vulnerability, and the challenges faced by law enforcement and the justice system in addressing such crimes. She prepared to testify about the investigation's findings, including the psychological evaluation, to provide the court with a comprehensive understanding of James Hayes's character and potential motives. As the legal process moved forward, James underwent further psychological assessments to monitor his mental state and readiness for trial. Dr. Alvarez's ongoing evaluations aimed to detect any changes or developments that might impact proceedings. The assessments also served to inform sentencing recommendations should James be convicted. Throughout this period, Detective Kim maintained communication with Linda Hayes, offering support and updates while navigating the sensitive dynamics of the family's grief and the public nature of the case. Linda's cooperation was vital in providing testimony and corroborating evidence, despite the emotional toll. The investigation's progression underscored the intricate interplay between forensic science, psychological analysis, and legal strategy in domestic violence homicide cases. Detective Kim's multidisciplinary approach aimed to ensure that justice would be served while acknowledging the human complexities inherent in such tragedies. As the trial date approached, preparations intensified. Prosecutors incorporated Dr. Alvarez's psychological report into their case, emphasizing James Hayes's potential for violence and manipulation. The defense team crafted arguments to challenge the interpretation of the evidence, highlighting uncertainties and advocating for a fair trial. Detective Kim reviewed her testimony, focusing on presenting clear, factual accounts of the investigation, evidence collection, and behavioral observations. She anticipated rigorous cross-examination, but remained committed to providing an honest and thorough narrative. The case of Marcus Hayes had evolved from a tragic death to a legal confrontation encapsulating themes of family conflict, psychological distress, and the pursuit of justice. Detective Kim's role as investigator and witness placed her at the heart of this intersection, responsible for bridging the gap between cold facts and the emotional realities of those involved. In the days leading up to the trial, the community continued to grapple with the case's impact, engaging in discussions about domestic violence awareness, support systems for vulnerable youth, and the challenges faced by law enforcement. Advocacy groups used the case to highlight the importance of early intervention and resources for families in crisis. Detective Kim reflected on the journey from the initial 911 call to the impending courtroom battle. The path had been fraught with obstacles, contradictory statements, hidden motives, and the complexities of human behavior. But her resolve to uncover the truth and seek justice for Marcus remained unwavering. As the legal proceedings loomed, all eyes turned toward the courthouse, where the fate of James Hayes would be determined. The case promised to test the boundaries of forensic science, psychological evaluation, and the justice system's ability to address the devastating consequences of domestic violence within a family. The trial of James Hayes began on March 18, 2024, drawing intense attention from local and regional media. The courtroom, packed with family members, community supporters, and reporters, was a solemn stage where the tragic story of Marcus Hayes's death would unfold under the scrutiny of law and public opinion. Detective Rachel Kim, having led the investigation, was called to testify early, setting the tone for the prosecution's case. The prosecution opened by painting a detailed picture of the events leading to Marcus's death, emphasizing the evidence that suggested a violent and deliberate act rather than an accident. Prosecutor Helen Grant presented forensic findings. The bruise on Marcus's neck consistent with strangulation, defensive wounds on his arms, and the presence of unknown DNA at the crime scene. She highlighted the timeline reconstructed through medical examiner reports and neighbor testimonies, showing that Marcus died well before Linda Hayes's emergency call. Grant described the digital evidence uncovered from Marcus's phone and James's devices, including deleted calls and texts pointing to escalating familial conflict. The prosecution argued that James, motivated by a desire to control the household and silence Marcus's complaints, had engaged in a fatal confrontation. Grant's opening statement underscored the theme of domestic violence and control, framing the case as one of tragic abuse within a family setting. Following the opening, Detective Kim took the stand to relay the investigation's findings. Calm and precise, she detailed the evidence collection process, the inconsistencies in Linda Hayes's and James Hayes's statements, and the forensic analysis that pointed to foul play. Kim explained how digital forensics recovered deleted messages, revealing Marcus's fear and the efforts to cover tracks by deleting incriminating evidence. During cross-examination, the defense attorney, Michael Reynolds, challenged Kim's conclusions. He suggested that the evidence was circumstantial and that the injuries could have resulted from an accidental fall or a struggle unrelated to James. Reynolds questioned the reliability of digital forensics and the interpretation of Marcus's messages, arguing that fear and conflict were common in many families and did not prove guilt. The defense's strategy centered on creating reasonable doubt. Reynolds argued that Marcus's death could have been accidental and that the forensic evidence was open to interpretation. He portrayed James as a flawed but non-violent stepfather, emphasizing the lack of direct eyewitnesses to the alleged assault. Reynolds also highlighted inconsistencies in neighbor testimonies and questioned the timing and accuracy of forensic reports. To support their case, the defense called expert witnesses, including a medical examiner who disputed the prosecution's cause of death assessment, suggesting that the bruising could have been post-mortem or from a fall. A forensic analyst testified that the unknown DNA at the scene could not be conclusively linked to James or any specific individual, introducing uncertainty. The defense also presented testimony from family friends and acquaintances who described James as a caring individual and denied knowledge of any violent behavior. This contrasted with the prosecution's narrative, creating a battle of character portrayals that highlighted the complexities of domestic violence cases. The prosecution countered by presenting testimony from Dr. Elena Alvarez, the forensic psychologist who had evaluated James. Dr. Alvarez detailed James's psychological profile, describing tendencies toward aggression, impulsivity, and manipulation. She explained how these traits, combined with the evidence of deleted communications and inconsistent statements, supported the prosecution's argument of premeditation and control. Dr. Alvarez's testimony was met with skepticism by the defense, who attempted to undermine her credibility by questioning the subjective nature of psychological profiling. Nevertheless, her insights provided the jury with a framework to understand James's potential motives and behavioral patterns. Throughout the trial, emotional testimonies from Marcus's friends and school counselors painted a portrait of a troubled teenager living in fear. One close friend broke down on the stand describing Marcus's last messages and his pleas for help. School staff recounted Marcus's withdrawal and distress, reinforcing the prosecution's portrayal of a young man desperate to escape an abusive environment. Linda Hayes testified as well, her demeanor somber and fraught with grief. She recounted her final moments with Marcus and described the tense atmosphere in the household. While her testimony was sometimes inconsistent with earlier statements, the prosecution argued that this was due to trauma and stress rather than deception. The defense seized on these inconsistencies, suggesting that Linda's grief had clouded her memory, further complicating the narrative. They also questioned her role in the events, implying possible complicity or negligence without direct evidence. As the trial progressed into its final days, both sides presented closing arguments that crystallized their respective narratives. Prosecutor Grant urged the jury to consider the weight of forensic evidence, digital communications, and psychological assessments, asserting that James Hayes's actions led directly to Marcus's death. She emphasized the need to hold perpetrators of domestic violence accountable to protect vulnerable family members. Defense attorney Reynolds appealed to the jury's sense of reasonable doubt, cautioning against convicting a man based on circumstantial evidence and psychological speculation. He reminded jurors that no eyewitness had directly implicated James and that alternative explanations for the evidence existed. The jury deliberated for 14 hours over 2 days, weighing the competing narratives and complex evidence. The community followed the proceedings closely, with discussions about domestic violence, the challenges of proving such cases, and the role of forensic technology in modern trials. Ultimately, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on the charge of second-degree murder. The decision reflected the jury's acceptance of the prosecution's argument that James Hayes had intentionally caused Marcus's death, driven by control and fear within the family dynamic. Judge Reynolds, presiding over the case, scheduled sentencing, emphasizing the seriousness of domestic abuse and its devastating consequences. The verdict sparked conversations across Maplewood about the need for greater awareness, prevention, and support for families affected by violence. Detective Kim's role in unraveling the complex investigation was widely recognized. Her meticulous work and testimony pivotal in securing justice for Marcus Hayes. The trial highlighted the evolving intersection of forensic science, digital evidence, and psychological analysis in addressing family violence cases. As the community grappled with the outcome, advocacy groups used the case to push for reforms in domestic violence interventions and youth protection services. The trial became a catalyst for broader discussions on safeguarding vulnerable individuals and the responsibilities of the justice system. For those close to Marcus, the verdict was a bittersweet milestone, an acknowledgement of truth and accountability amid the enduring pain of loss. Detective Kim prepared to continue her work, mindful of the many cases still hidden behind closed doors, each demanding the same commitment to uncovering truth and delivering justice. Following the jury's guilty verdict in the trial of James Hayes, the Maplewood community braced itself for the sentencing hearing, aware of the gravity of the moment and the broader implications for domestic violence awareness. On May 10, 2024, Judge Reynolds convened the court to deliver the sentence, balancing the need for justice with the recognition of the profound loss endured by Marcus Hayes' family and the community. The courtroom was filled with a somber crowd, family members, friends, community advocates, and media representatives, all bearing witness to the culmination of a case that had gripped the town for months. Linda Hayes, Marcus's mother, sat quietly, her face etched with grief yet resolute, while James Hayes appeared stoic, his fate now sealed by the judicial decision. Judge Reynolds addressed the court with measured solemnity, recounting the harrowing details of the case as established during the trial. He emphasized the severity of the offense, a young life extinguished by violence within the supposed safety of a family home. The judge acknowledged the evidence of premeditation and the pattern of domestic abuse that had led to Marcus's death, underscoring the critical need to protect vulnerable individuals from such harm. In delivering the sentence, Judge Reynolds imposed a term of 25 years to life imprisonment on James Hayes, a decision reflecting both the seriousness of the crime and the imperative to deter similar acts of violence. The sentence included stipulations that James would be ineligible for parole for a minimum of 25 years, signaling the court's strong stance against domestic violence and the protection of minors. The judge's remarks extended beyond the individual case, serving as a broader commentary on the societal responsibility to address and prevent family violence. He called for increased awareness, enhanced support services, and community engagement to identify and intervene in such situations before they escalate to tragedy. The courtroom atmosphere was heavy with emotion as Linda Hayes spoke briefly after the sentencing. Her voice, though trembling, carried strength as she expressed sorrow for her son and hoped that his death would serve to prevent further suffering. "Marcus deserved a future," she said, "and I pray that no other family has to endure what we have." Following the hearing, community leaders and advocacy organizations seized the moment to renew calls for action against domestic violence. Local nonprofit groups organized vigils and educational workshops, using the case as a stark reminder of the hidden struggles many families face. The tragedy of Marcus Hayes became a catalyst for dialogue and reform, aimed at improving protective services and increasing public awareness. Law enforcement agencies in the region also reviewed their protocols for responding to domestic disturbances, seeking to enhance early intervention strategies. Detective Rachel Kim, reflecting on the case, emphasized the importance of community vigilance and the need for accessible resources for victims and families at risk. The aftermath of the sentencing revealed a community grappling with mixed emotions: relief that justice had been served, sorrow over the loss of a promising young life, and determination to prevent similar tragedies. Media coverage highlighted these themes, spotlighting the ongoing challenges in addressing domestic violence and the role of the criminal justice system in providing accountability. Within the Hayes family, the impact was profound and enduring. Linda Hayes, while devastated by her loss, became an outspoken advocate for domestic violence awareness, speaking publicly about the dangers of abuse and the importance of support networks. Her courage in sharing her story inspired others to come forward and seek help. Support groups formed in Marcus's memory, offering counseling and assistance to families affected by domestic violence. Scholarships and community programs were established in his name, aiming to honor his legacy by fostering education and resilience among vulnerable youth. The case also prompted discussions among policymakers regarding funding and legislative measures to strengthen protections for children and victims of domestic abuse. Lawmakers debated improvements to reporting systems, training for law enforcement, and expansion of shelter services. Detective Kim continued her work with renewed dedication, using lessons learned from the Hayes investigation to improve investigative practices and community outreach. She engaged with local schools and organizations to educate about the signs of abuse and the importance of early intervention. As Maplewood moved forward, the shadow of Marcus Hayes' death lingered as a solemn reminder of the consequences of unchecked domestic violence. The community's collective response underscored a commitment to healing, prevention, and justice. While the sentencing marked a legal conclusion, the broader journey toward addressing family violence remained ongoing. The legacy of the case carried with it both the pain of loss and the hope for a safer future, one where young lives like Marcus's could be protected and nurtured rather than cut short. In the years following the verdict, Marcus's story became a touchstone in local conversations about youth vulnerability and domestic safety. His memory lived on not only through formal programs, but also in the hearts of those who sought to honor his life by fostering compassion and vigilance in their community. Detective Kim's involvement in the case was recognized as a model of thorough, compassionate law enforcement. Her efforts highlighted the crucial role of detectives in bridging forensic science, psychological understanding, and community engagement to pursue justice in complex family-related crimes. The Hayes case left an indelible mark on Maplewood, serving as both a cautionary tale and a call to action. Its reverberations extended beyond the courtroom, inspiring ongoing efforts to create environments where children and families could thrive free from fear and violence. As the community continued to heal, the memory of Marcus Hayes endured as a beacon for change, a poignant testament to the urgent need for awareness, intervention, and justice in the face of domestic violence. In the months and years following the sentencing of James Hayes, the tragic death of Marcus Hayes continued to resonate deeply within the Maplewood community, shaping conversations and actions around domestic violence and youth vulnerability. The case became more than a legal proceeding. It evolved into a catalyst for awareness, advocacy, and systemic change. Linda Hayes, burdened by grief yet driven by a profound sense of purpose, emerged as a prominent voice in the fight against domestic abuse. She began speaking publicly about the dangers she and her son had faced, sharing her story at community centers, schools, and advocacy events. Her candid accounts brought a human face to the statistics, encouraging others to recognize signs of abuse and seek help before tragedy struck. Despite the pain, Linda's resilience inspired many and fostered a sense of hope amid the darkness. In honor of Marcus's memory, local organizations established scholarships and community programs designed to support at-risk youth. These initiatives aim to provide educational opportunities and safe spaces for teenagers navigating turbulent home lives. The Marcus Hayes Memorial Scholarship, funded through donations and community fundraising, became a symbol of hope and a tangible commitment to nurturing potential that might otherwise be lost. Conversations sparked by the case led to increased collaboration between law enforcement, social workers, educators, and medical professionals. The tragedy underscored the critical need for improved protective services and early intervention strategies to identify and support vulnerable families. Maplewood's child welfare agencies reviewed and enhanced their protocols, while schools implemented training to better recognize signs of domestic distress among students. The case also influenced legislative discussions at the state level. Policymakers debated reforms aimed at strengthening domestic violence laws, increasing funding for shelters, and expanding access to counseling services. Advocates cited Marcus's case as a poignant example of the consequences when systems fail to protect those at risk. These efforts contributed to gradual but meaningful changes in the support infrastructure for victims and families. Detective Rachel Kim, whose meticulous investigation had been instrumental in securing justice, became involved in community outreach and training programs. She shared insights from the Hayes case with law enforcement agencies to improve responses to domestic violence calls and family-related crimes. Kim's work emphasized the importance of integrating forensic science, psychological evaluation, and compassionate interviewing techniques to uncover the truth and support victims. The community of Maplewood grappled with the lasting impact of the case, balancing sorrow with a commitment to healing and prevention. Memorial services and annual vigils honored Marcus's life, providing spaces for reflection and solidarity. These gatherings fostered dialogue about the pervasive nature of domestic abuse and the collective responsibility to intervene. Media coverage continued to highlight the broader implications of the Hayes case, contributing to national conversations about juvenile vulnerability and the justice system's role in addressing family violence. The trial and its outcomes became reference points in discussions about how best to support young victims and hold perpetrators accountable while considering psychological complexities. Within the family, the journey of healing was ongoing. Linda Hayes' advocacy work was both a tribute to her son and a means of coping with unimaginable loss. Her efforts helped transform personal tragedy into community strength, offering comfort to others facing similar challenges. The Hayes case prompted reflection on the role of technology in investigations, illustrating how digital footprints can reveal hidden truths and aid justice. The use of recovered texts, deleted calls, and online activity in Marcus's case underscored the evolving landscape of criminal investigation, where virtual evidence can be as critical as physical. As years passed, Marcus's story remained a touchstone for educators, social workers, and law enforcement professionals. Training programs incorporated lessons from the case, emphasizing the signs of domestic distress and the importance of interagency cooperation. These educational efforts aim to prevent future tragedies by equipping those in positions of trust with the tools to act decisively. The legacy of Marcus Hayes extended beyond Maplewood, influencing approaches to domestic violence nationwide. The case was cited in academic research and policy papers exploring juvenile victimization, family dynamics, and the intersection of forensic science with psychological assessment. Despite the passage of time, the emotional imprint of the case endured. Those involved, family, investigators, community members, carried the memory of Marcus with them, a reminder of the fragility of youth and the devastating impact of violence. The pursuit of justice had illuminated systemic gaps and inspired change, but it also left an indelible mark on all who had been touched by the tragedy. Detective Kim reflected on the profound responsibility borne by those who investigate such cases. The Hayes investigation had demanded not only technical expertise, but empathy and perseverance. It had highlighted the complexities of human relationships and the critical need for vigilance in protecting the vulnerable. Marcus Hayes's life, though tragically cut short, became a beacon for progress, a symbol of the urgent need to address domestic violence with seriousness and compassion. His story compelled the community and beyond to confront uncomfortable truths and commit to building safer environments for children and families. In the quiet moments of remembrance, Marcus's legacy lived on, not only through scholarships and programs, but through the collective resolve to prevent others from suffering similar fates. His case remained a powerful narrative of loss, justice, and the enduring hope for a future where every child could grow without fear.